if somebody's either coming from, so if we look at our target market, if somebody's coming in and they've make a spellcaster, they figure out how to mem a spell, which will be, I think that's confusing in and of itself. And then the question becomes, should they have to mem a spell? Shouldn't they just start with the spells loaded, right? And this is, and I'm not saying that to like harp on your example. I'm saying that because I've actually watched this happen during my time on EQ, and it's that slippery slope that we start going down. But it becomes like a thing. It's like, okay, well, we should start you out with food and drink, but that doesn't solve the problem of helping players understand where to get food and drink, because they'll eventually run out of food and drink. It's like, all right, we started out with 5. Well, but it runs out too fast. 20. Okay, but it'll eventually run out. You start out with an item. Now, if your starter dagger is enough that you don't need items until like level 5 or whatever, then I think that's already a problem. So the question becomes like, do you even start out with a dagger? Well, sure, because then you can just start fighting immediately. But if you go straight into fighting, at some point you should be running into all of these questions, right? And so John just said, or think, oh, it says I need this item. I guess I'll find it. In thinking about all of the problems that you can solve, we look at them as like these problems as potentially inconvenience to a player playing the game. What is playing the game? Well, playing the game is just push button, kill monster, get item, maybe get more powerful to kill bigger monster, push button. And it's so easy to start reducing it down to like, well, but should I even have to like set up my, should I have to mem spells? Should I have to set up a hotbar? Should I have to do anything other than click monster? It's like, why have reagents as well as a topic that could come up where it's like, all right, but why have reagents? Why not just have different flavored buttons that kill monster? Well, that's definitely one way to make it more efficient. And, it's like, essentially, it kind of devolves back into like Gauntlet, where it's, essentially we just have 4 different flavors of kind of doing the same thing. But the question is about whether problems posed to the player should be removed, but the pacing at which they are presented to the player. But the question is, again, how much do we leave that up to the player to sort of seek out their priority? Like, I don't like the idea also of going, okay, welcome to the game. Now click here. Now do this. Right? It's more of like, what are the player's priorities? Is the player that comes in, are they most interested in finding their first quest? Are they most interested in exploring the town and talking to people? Do they want to go straight into combat? Have they ever played a game? Have they ever played D&D before playing an MMO? Have they played an MMO? And if they have played an MMO, is it a more modern MMO or was it one of the older MMOs, right? And it's going to dictate their priorities. Now, the idea of keeping them from being able to pick what their priorities, which a lot of tutorials do, which really bugs the shit out of me, I find that less palatable than I do just going, you're in a world now, and that means you're going to have all sorts of problems from this point forward that you need to figure out how to resolve. Providing mechanisms to help them along. So back to what Keith was saying, I'm still unsure about being able to ask NPCs where you can find stuff, since it removes the need to ask other players. Their instructions aren't going to be necessarily the best. So I need to hook it back up and see if it still works. But essentially, I could go up to Gardamir and be like, who sells reagents? And he could say, merchant so-and-so, what are we facing now? Northeast. So merchant so-and-so, or you can get those from merchant so-and-so, just a ways east of here near, in the market. And that's the level of information you're going to get. You can leave it at just try to cast spell X, but nothing happens. Be super ambiguous about it. And then asking the player, yeah, this spell is weird, nothing. I think there's plenty of opportunity for us in the spell book. I mean, once you've looked at the spell description, we can provide you that information. We don't have to, like, I still need to talk to the team and talk to Nick about the degree to which we provide all of the numbers, etc. But something like knowing if you've got a spell and you know it and you've scribed it, then you should know that it requires malachite. Now the question is, where do I get malachite? Because what I could do is go, okay, I've added this spell. It requires malachite. This other spell requires fire moss. Okay, well, it looks like I don't have any malachite or fire moss in my lunchbox that my mom packed me to go into Adventureland. If we wind up using the note approach of take this note to so-and-so, then that's one step. And then I could go, well, I need some fire moss and some malachite, which then allows me to either explore, allows me to ask OOC. It allows me to look on the internet, or it allows me to hopefully listen to the initial instructions that say you can talk to guards, or you can talk to many characters in games the way you would talk to players, and they may help you out. And like a guard will say, oh, it's down in the market, which then the experience that I'm not necessarily getting straight out the gate of, pun intended, of just spawning in here, having everything I need, and immediately going, oh, I have everything I need. Let's just go kill things. I'll worry about the rest of this game later. And so it's like, okay, well, shit, my first mission then is I can either go out there and just start stabbing things, or I really want to cast a spell, kind of like I just did. I can go to this market, and then when I go to the market to get those reagents for the first time, it gives me a little bit of content. It gives me something to figure out and pushes me into the zone. And I'm like, oh, shit, this place is pretty cool. And it's not whether or not spells should include reagents or how much handholding should be included in helping players find those reagents. It's simply about whether it's a good introductory problem to give a new player at the moment they log in and check their starter inventory for the first time. I don't see the slippery slope argument as overly compelling, because everything is always a gradient, and that's clearly the context in which I am raising the question. It's obviously about deciding where to draw a line, not that everyone is advocating for a particular extreme. I think some gamers just want the game to be log in, start pressing buttons, do things, stuff dies, experience goes up. The thing is, they can do that here. It's just, it would be a bit suboptimal. I think the approach of having there be a number of reasons for you to run around and explore this environment initially, to do other things beyond just go straight into combat, is fine. We may find that our target audience just wants kill thing and see experience bar go up. And I could be wrong on that. But what I'd like to try at the beginning at least, and then see whether or not we can make an experience that's a bit more stripped down in terms of like what we start you out with, and more intuitive in terms of how you resolve that problem. I remember the first time I logged into EQ, it was snowing in Kelithan, and I had no intention of going straight to killing mobs in a new game. I was amazed by my surroundings, and when I explored the game, I had what the game had to offer in as much detail. Are reagents required for spells, or do they improve, modify them? I thought D&D reagents mostly modified spells, but weren't required for casting. I'd love for us to try with it being more based on there being a requirement and there being some things that can modify. I think players will generally, not everyone, want to jump into combat very quickly. Setting goals like buying spell upgrades, armor, etc. will always come after those first few moments of initial gameplay. That's agency players want. Posing starter problems in their backpack from the get-go dilutes that agency by placing a clear objective towards objective to start towards whether they it's not removing your agency. You have the agency to go into combat, and then we're giving you the autonomy to fail. D&D reagents in old editions were absolutely required. Lindra says, that's what I thought as well. But by 5e, I'm sure. Yeah, see, that's kind of probably what happened then. It's like, it's the softening. 5e is the modern MMO of D&D, right? And the thing was, like, before I had my pet, I was able to enter combat. I was just super suboptimal. And my expectation is that you've got to enter a certain amount of combat in order to get the money to get the reagent in the first place. Isn't that softening okay though? As feedback to the player, the spell will still work but could later discover how a reagent. It's just to me, that's just a design decision. You know what I mean? Like I don't know that softening is necessarily okay. If you're making a game in which you want players to always be able to do everything but maybe just not as good, then it's fine. Just throwing this out there, what if the spell worked but reagent just made it stronger? Again, it's depending on the experience that you want to set up. Like, and I'm not just trying to like fire back or hammer on or whatever, but it's at this stage of playing around with it. Again, we're pretty far from being live, so odds are we're going to have a lot of playtesting that happens before we get to the point where we're bringing in people who have never played one of these games or could potentially be in a category that's not essentially whatever your current opinions are. You know what I mean? But the idea is just like, let's start stripped down and see how much we actually need to add in there. Maybe it's just me. This goes back to there was a question earlier. Or make early areas drop the reagents to encourage players to naturally find a way out. Yeah. So T-Lock, that's a fair point that I didn't mention before. So they're on a drop table, right? So having those, you know, pop up, it sucks because skeletons being skeletons, it's so easy to put all the good stuff on them. Don't want to necessarily do that. Maybe you can find random reagents and stuff in the guts of a rat or whatever. But having those be available in a couple of different ways is what we were thinking. But when we were first, because I was talking to Ali about this like months and months ago when we were talking about like what should players start with. But even things, you know, even things like those first messages of you're out of food and drink, it's like, all right, so at that point I'm posed with a problem. I'm out of food and drink and I need to buy more. If I haven't bothered to explore at this point, cool. Hopefully by then we've helped the player understand that they can ask chat, they can talk to NPCs and say, where do I buy food? Where do I buy drink? They can remember the NPCs that were incidental, they incidentally just sort of ran into. Keith asked, why wouldn't you just leave that up to PC interaction though? For me, like my opinion on that is, because Dargit said, I do kind of like the idea of having in-character dialogue from trainers to give useful newbie pointers. I think NPC GMs would be there to help you play your class, not just buy stuff and train skill points. Whether or not you want to engage with randos from the beginning, my answer on that is the more that we can sort of blur the boundaries of player and NPC, the more that it feels less like NPC is just this sort of brainless thing that's in there or only serves this one specific purpose. When I was playing the old Ultima games, I talked to everybody. I know it's a single player game, but you go up and you talk to everybody and then you wind up having that like standard list of questions that you would ask NPCs where it's like, you know, what's your name and who are you, or like what do you do and will you join my party and all of that stuff. And so yeah, like having that be more of a thing where we are from the onset encourage players to interact with NPCs is also then getting them in the mindset of, hey, we don't know what NPC is necessarily going to be that NPC that has an interesting quest for me, right? Like it's that idea of getting away from the exclamation marks and instead going, it probably wouldn't hurt if I want to explore the part of the game where interaction with NPCs provides quest content instead of just kill things, which again, I've said it in a few times today, and I don't want to knock that playstyle of kill thing, level up, or kill thing, get, you know, loot, kill bigger thing. It's more of like, yeah. So BDC Retro said, once a player learns in the city to talk to NPCs, that opens up the entire world of NPCs you can add to create content. And also it reinforces the situation, or it reinforces the thing that's happened since I started streaming, which is people coming in and going, hey, have all of the quests in EverQuest been found, right? So that's, people have asked that so many times that like it really stuck with me of like, what if all of the content hasn't been found after 20 years? And if we're using the scheduler wisely, then it could also be that you may want to talk to NPCs at different times just to see if they say something different.